Hi, once again, welcome to this channel. In this video, much of what I will say will be grounded in the work of theologian Ruben Alves, who was very influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche. As we have seen, Nietzsche followed Schopenhauer in placing the will as the great force that affirms life. That is to say, there is a world because there is a will that wants to live. This will is the ground for the instinct that we see in all animals. Philosophically, we must understand the will in the sense of a great energy and passion for life. This idea has its origins in the thought of Arthur Schopenhauer, who was influenced by Buddhism. In the same wavelength, Otto Rank will state that true human values are the values of the affirmation of life. Let us now ponder about our experience in the world. The world is a dangerous place, but where we need to live. We know that the world can give us life or death, joy or pain, continuity or extinction. Take into consideration that the human being needs to live, and there are so many threats, the environment could never be perceived as neutral. Anyone who is involved in the struggle for survival is forced to perceive the world emotionally. This is the immediate experience that determines our way of being in the world. Therefore, the experience of living is deeply emotional, and there is nothing wrong about this emotional feeling. Speaking of survival, we speak of the body, of the life of the body, and the will which presents itself by means of the body. Regarding the body, commonly we associate it with a more impoverished version of the will, which is the instinct. By its turn, we associate instinct with two things that can be very disturbing, which are aggressiveness and sexuality. However, we need to understand that other things, such as solidarity, mercy and tenderness, also originate from the will, which always promotes behaviors that affirm life, including the symbolic life of the human being. We need to understand that intelligence is at the service of the will, as far as the will needs to assure the continuity of life in beings who have a deep emotional experience of the world. This experience of the individual with the world, as well with his fellow men, is acquired by means of relationships. Relationships are dynamic. They don't have the separation between subject and object. They transcend the immediate data captured by the senses. They are therefore made by symbols. Psychoanalysis came to clarify the function of these symbols, and thanks to it, as for instance, in the interpretation of dreams, we know that an image does not necessarily correspond to an object in the physical world. Some criticize the Bible, saying, "How can you believe in a book that says that a snake talked?" We know that in the world of symbols, a snake is not really a snake, a river is not really a river, and a mountain is not really a mountain. The point is that the living being that needs to survive needs the symbols. These symbols are not a carbon copy of reality. Maybe they will never be. Although the ideal of scientific objectivity would tell us that we must have an interpretation of the world that is free of emotions. But this remains only an ideal, or rather a utopia of scientific neutrality. In this regard, Ernest Becker told us that we often think that at some point we move from an illusion to reality. But that is not what really happens. In fact, we move from one interpretation to another interpretation. What is important, Becker tells us, is not that science is not enough advanced. This is not the case. But that human beings cannot reduce all their meanings to the physical world, because, in doing so, they would have an impoverished world with impoverished relationships. For instance, Ernest Becker wrote that, in the crash of 1929, people say that many investors committed suicide, but in fact we must consider that, according to Becker, if the meaning of their lives was grounded in their money, they did not commit suicide. From the moment they lost their money, they were already dead. Therefore, what happens is that the established society will have to make sacred its institutions which are transient. However, the human being cannot be a slave of the world of phenomena and cannot reduce all their meanings to the physical world. This independence is a demand of the will, and not of the intelligence, as far as what wants to live is the desire, the wish, that is, the will. In disagreement with the human being's fight for life against all obstacles, the discourse of the great society will be that normality means the adjustment to the established world order, that everything works within chains of cause and effect, even morality, and that, to understand the person, we must consider it as a thing, without free will. Rubem Alves tells us that consciousness is not a mere duplication of the physical world. It's not a carbon copy of the physical world. By its turn, natural reality by itself would be devoid of human meaning. It becomes a human world only after it has been structured in accordance to the will of the individual, who needs to assert life within a hostile world. On the contrary, mere adjustment is a surrender of the human being to the world of phenomena. This surrender means enslavement to the established social structures which are cruel, although those structures of power and domination will pretend to be normal and inevitable. But life, understood as will and passion, refuses to conform to the world as it simply is, for it is always seeking for more life and for a better life that no social structure can ever materialize in the physical world. Therefore, when contemporary rationality puts the religious ideal as impossible, it is making sacred the existing social order, placing it as inevitable and therefore absolute. It also places a struggle for power as inevitable, together with the hierarchy of domination, or the hierarchy that we have today in our society of today, which is transient, and putting this as something that is normal and natural, that people simply must accept. In this vision, normality and mental health are defined by the adjustment of the individual to the social order. In this sense, we must consider that the rationality embraced by atheism is consistent with the theoretical framework of the Western civilization in our present moment. The problem is that life is not. For the foundation of life is the will, or we might say, the passion, the instinct. The rationality of the contemporary world must maintain instinct under control. It must pretend that there is no instinct, that all that we have are social constructions, as, for instance, the gender roles of boys and girls. That denial of instinct is the politically correct. Paradoxically, the conflicting visions of St. Augustine and Martin Luther, or the good craziness of Mullah Nasruddin, show us what life really is, and help us in elaborating the suffering that exists in the world. Paradoxically, it is the religious attitude which embraces the deep emotional experience of being in the world. We must understand that, according to Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, intelligence left alone has no desire to live, for desire belongs to the will. And, according to Ruben Alves, we are left with the options of despair or hope, although hope is necessarily a utopia, as hope needs the elsewhere, needs the beyond. Thus, only the religious attitude can bring hope. The rationality of our worldview is a great denial of the will, for life springs from the will. Things like desire or wish comes only from the will, and life is a passion, desirable for its horizon of utopia, which is conquered only in the absolute, in the elsewhere. Therefore, religion seems to be a denial, although the real denial of life is the naive theoretical speculation that diminishes life, as it cannot control the will, which is life itself. And that naive theoretical speculation is not science. That we must understand, for a better comprehension of the problem that our culture is facing today. Before finishing, I would like to invite you to visit my scholarly site, with my articles and my book. Thank you for watching. Please share this video and subscribe.